counts. We're also changing the amount of 30 hours requirement for the curriculum. We're taking the 30 hours out and still requiring the curriculum as the code indicates. We're just not putting a time limit or expectation on that curriculum. And then we're also making some changes specifically to some of the instruction pieces around substance abuse, railroad crossings, and also pedestrian awareness. Mr. Speaker, there is an amendment.
There is an amendment. The clerk will call up the amendment.
H1372 by Fry of Clark.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Clark for opening remarks on H1372.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. H1372 allows this parent-taught driver's ed to be available for all students in the state of Iowa and their parents. Those are my opening comments on the amendment.
Is there discussion? The chair recognizes the lady from Cerro Gordo, Representative Steckman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This kind of seems like deja vu. About 2011, I think we went through all this. And this amendment reminds me of a saying I've heard. You know, I've been in school, so I can teach. My husband thought that. He has his master's in business, and when he retired, he decided to take a course in substitute teaching. How hard can it be? So he took the weekend course and got a call for middle school Friday in the spring, and he took it happily, going there smiling. Because, after all, he's been in a classroom. He knows how to teach. About noon, I had a message on my phone. I would rather be anywhere else than here. So, some of you that have taught know exactly what he's talking about. So, this is saying anyone that has a driver's license can teach their child to drive. That's what this is saying. And my point is, just because you have a valid driver's license doesn't mean you're qualified to teach someone to drive. We had a representative here who has now left us, Kurt Hansen from Fairfield. Wonderful man. He was a driver's ed instructor, and he came back in 2011 with his manual, the classes and instruction that he went through to be able to teach driver's ed. I want kids driving responsibly and knowing all there is to know about driving. I want to read this. This is back from when we were debating the homeschool driver's ed bill back in 2011, and it's from an Ankeny driver's ed instructor. As a longtime driver's ed instructor in the Ankeny area, I'm following SF 146 with interest. I oppose this, and here are my reasons. Throughout my teaching career, I worked with parents in developing young drivers. Students improved most rapidly when parents took the time to drive with their children. That's important, and Representative Fry mentioned that at our subcommittee. Parents need to drive with their student. However, he says, most parents are reluctant to place their child in the most challenging driving conditions. That was my job as a driver instructor because I had the background and the experience and the brake. Every driving instructor car has an extra brake for the instructor. In a typical driver's ed class, I usually use the brake from 3 to 25 times per student. Last summer, with 16 students, I used the brake 148 times. I keep track because the bill keeps reappearing year after year. Well, it passed, so it's not reappearing anymore. Parents will most likely not have a brake. I have a friend that's a driver's instructor in Mason City. He has the brake, and he said he likes to take kids out on a gravel road and do some braking that surprises them and see what their reaction would be. All those kinds of things prepare them to be a better defensive driver. And I'm not saying parents are bad teachers. I'm just saying they do not have the background and the brake to teach their kids to drive. So I would ask my caucus, and I would ask the rest of you to please vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the lady from Johnston, Representative Masher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Fry yield?
Will the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
You are in order.
Representative Fry, in your amendment, it says anyone who has a valid driver's license, correct?
Correct?
So if someone had had a suspended license and then got their license back, could they teach driver's ed to a student in this particular case?
Under the current law that we have today, there are requirements and expectations on that driver's license and that parent who's teaching. And if there are certain violations that would prohibit them within certain time frames or certain violations, I would have to pull that law up for you to read.
Can you cite the sections of the code that say that?
Be happy to get it to you after debate.
Okay, because it seems to me that if someone has had a suspended license, even though they have gotten it back, it certainly doesn't mean that they are qualified to teach their own child. And certainly if they have a history of that, meaning it's happened more than once or twice, then it seems to me, again, that that isn't necessarily the best person to be teaching a student. Thank you, Representative Fry. I'm a no vote today. To me, driver's ed is extremely important, and many of us took driver's ed in high school. We remember what that was about. I even learned to change a tire. I'm not sure they're doing that anymore. I think they have a number for AAA. But the point being, there are some valuable lessons being taught in driver's ed. And those courses are extremely important in order for students to be prepared behind the wheel. That wheel is a deadly weapon. And we know that because people are killed. When I drive in every day to Des Moines on Monday, I look at the sign that tells us how many deaths there have been in Iowa over the weekend or during the week. Right now it's 60 that we've seen so far this year alone. I don't know how many of those are teen drivers, but we know our teen drivers do not have the same set of experience that adult drivers do. And I also know that adult drivers are not always good role models for their children. And I know that because they oftentimes, my grandsons are ones who have their permits right now, and I drive with them quite a bit. And every time they see someone who does a rolling stop, they point it out to me. And they say, "Grandma, there's another person who rolled and stopped, didn't really stop. They did a rolling stop, and you've always told us that's wrong." And I said, and if you watch, many of those folks who are driving have kids in the back seat. So I look at the example that sets for children who are learning how to drive, and I know that many in this room have probably done those rolling stops too. I know I am much more conscientious about it now, having teenagers who have been in the car with me, because I want to set that good role model, and I know someone else's kid is also probably watching. So when it comes to driver's ed, it's an extremely important course. It's an extremely important course that parents need the background and the knowledge to be able to convey that to their children. I will be a no vote today because I value the education that our driver's education teachers provide. I value the fact that they are trained professionals in how to do that best. And I value the fact that they have the knowledge and the expertise to be good role models for students. I don't know that parents always are able to do that. And to me, that puts us all in danger. So I will be a no vote on this amendment and the bill today. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Lynn, Representative Jardy.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the House. I agree with Representative Masher that parents often do things that they don't want their kids to do, and there's a cliche that says, "Do as I say, not as I do." I know that all of us, when we're driving and we pull up to a stoplight, have seen drivers do many different things. It might be shaving. It might be putting makeup on. Oftentimes, we know when we've had legislation come through subcommittee and committee here about texting and driving. Kids see their parents do things. How difficult is it for a parent to say, well, you can't text and drive when the student or the child sees their parent do that? This last summer, my 3 daughters and I built a little library for our yard. We built it well. It survived the derecho in Cedar Rapids. But because we built a little library doesn't mean that I can teach industrial technology. Because I can drive a car and because I have a license doesn't mean that I can teach driver's education. The Board of Educational Examiners has an endorsement for individuals that want to teach driver's education. They take multiple classes. It's not simply just getting a driver's license and saying go. So I am in opposition to this bill because it is a safety issue, not just for the students and the family, but for everybody on the road. We need to ensure that folks who are teaching this class are certified, are trained, and know how to handle the students behind the wheel.
Seeing no further discussion, the gentleman from Clark moves Amendment H1372. All those in favor of its passage shall vote aye. Aye. All those opposed shall vote no. No. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment has passed. We're now back on Senate File 546 as amended. Is there discussion? The chair recognizes the lady from Cerro Gordo, Representative Steckman.
Yes, will Representative Fry yield to a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Certainly.
You are in order.
Thank you. On page 4 of the bill, lines 4 through 7, it's a new subsection. It says, this section shall not be construed to require or prohibit testing of any subject matter at intervals more frequently or at grade levels other than those set forth in section, which is the statewide assessment, section 256.7, subparagraph. So what's that mean, shall not require or prohibit? In other words, there's just no, you can't ask them to do it and you can't prohibit them from doing it. I don't understand what that means.
My understanding, Representative, is that section's dealing with the current assessments, and if it's not already currently in the assessment that students are taking, then this would not fall into any assessment going forth.
Say that again.
If this is not already currently taught in the assessment, which I don't believe it is, or tested on in the assessment, the current state assessment?
No, it's not.
So I believe this section would say then we would not require it to be tested on in the future.
Or prohibited. So it's kind of just up in the air. They can do whatever, right?
Your words.
Okay. And then, thank you, Representative Fry. Currently, what this bill does is change some guidelines, and the way it was explained to me at subcommittee is that, well, my kids, they do the online course, and they're just sitting back waiting for it to be over because they already know it. And as a teacher, I've had kids say that to me, you know, oh, I'm done, Mrs. Steckman. I've already read that. I know all about it. But then I question them, and maybe they don't know so much about it. So part of the requirement is to have 30 hours of classroom instruction. Well, we got rid of that. They're just going to have instruction, maybe 5 hours, maybe 15, whatever. I guess it doesn't matter. It's just driving a big lethal weapon, you know. And then down here, they're supposed to have 4 hours of instruction on substance abuse, and that's what's required in the public and the private schools. Well, we're not going to have 4 hours. We're just going to have some instruction, whatever. I know my friend that teaches driver's ed had me come to one of his classes when he was talking about substance abuse, and he had glasses that he put on the kids that would simulate being inebriated, being drunk. And it was very interesting. These kids saw what the glasses would do after 1 or 2 drinks and several drinks, and how their facilities were hampered and they wouldn't be able to drive a car. So I think those things are important for kids to go through, those issues. And just, a little bit of instruction, and I guess you have it all if you're homeschooled. 20 minutes of instruction on railroad crossings is supposed to be taught in the private and public schools. But we got rid of that too. Just tell them that's a railroad sign, so be careful there. That's gone. So I'm not sure I quite understand why I was against taking the education out of the driver's training program back in 2011, and I'm certainly against these changes now. What are the requirements? Could I ask Representative Fry a question? Did you find it?
Will the gentleman yield?
Sure.
You are in order.
So a valid driver's license, how will they not have a valid driver's license?
How will who not have a valid driver's license?
Whoever's teaching. All they have to do is have a valid driver's license, and someone asked a question about, do they get in an accident? Does that mean they don't have a valid driver's license, or what?
One can lose their license for many reasons. I don't know if that's what you're asking me.
Okay, thank you. I'll just read what it says here in the code. Thank you. The department shall not disqualify a person from providing street or highway driving instructions, and the Board of Education examiners shall not withhold or withdraw authorization for the sole reason that the person was involved in a motor vehicle accident, unless either of the following exists. So these are the two reasons why they cannot teach driver's ed. The person contributed to a motor vehicle accident and the accident caused a death or serious injury to another person. The person contributed to the motor vehicle accident and it was the person's second or subsequent motor vehicle accident in a 2-year period. So those are the two reasons why someone can't teach driver's ed. Everything else, I guess, if you have a driver's license, is okay. I know my friend that teaches driver's ed, there are very important things that they teach those kids that as a parent, I'm not qualified to teach, and I don't think many of us in here are. Maybe Representative McConkey, because he is a patrolman, or Representative Thorpe, or Breckenridge might have some qualifications that would enable them to teach driver's ed. But on the whole, I don't think those of us in this room are qualified. Thank you. I'll be a no on this bill.
Seeing no further discussion, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Clark for closing comments on Senate File 546.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House, and thank you for those who had a nice dialogue on this particular piece of legislation. Let me just share with you a few clarities on this legislation to make sure the body understands what we're actually talking about. Representative Steckman, moments ago you were talking about those who maybe would be disqualified or related to who wouldn't have a driver's license. You did leave out some key words in your reading of your definition, talking about habitual violators or habitual offenders, and there is some language in the code that describes them. So I'm a little shocked that you left certain words out as you were reading the code to us. The second thing I would also suggest to remind you of is that when we were in subcommittee, I believe it was your idea that you brought forth about opening this up to all students and parents. You're quite frustrated about the fact that we weren't offering this to everyone in the state, and why would homeschoolers just get the opportunity to have this taught to them by their parents? I asked you at that time if you'd be interested in co-sponsoring an amendment, to which you laughed and said, I don't believe so. But at the time, you thought that was a good idea, and apparently today you don't. I would also suggest to you that the Department of Transportation has the great opportunity to continue to evaluate all courses in which they offer. Today they offer 4 different courses for students to take this online driver's education. Nowhere in this legislation have we taken the authority away from the Department of Transportation and their expertise in what kind of curriculum they would offer for these courses. So I, for one, would suggest that the Department of Transportation probably has more knowledge about what to teach in these courses than maybe what we do debating on the House floor. Also, nowhere in the legislation does it get rid of, and Representative Steckman, you again said, it gets rid of substance abuse and railroad crossing teaching. Absolutely not. It does not. What it does is it doesn't say how many hours of that has to be taught, but it still leaves in the fact that those two subjects have to be taught. And let's not forget, we've actually added in the requirement to having pedestrian safety also now taught, which didn't exist. So to suggest that we're weakening somehow driver's education by doing this, I think is an absolute fallacy. Representative Masher, to your question, Section 321.178A, subsection 2, I would guess you probably maybe had it already pulled up already like Representative Steckman did before she asked me the question, but in the event you didn't, that's where you might find the answer to your questions about those definitions. I also believe that parents do have the ability to teach their children in many different ways, many different subjects. I, for one, have had the privilege of teaching now 4 children, driver's ed, in my own family. And I can tell you the amount of time that I spend with that child in driver's education far outweighs the amount of time I received when I went through driver's education in the school system. The attention, the detail, the desire that I have to make sure that my child drives safely, because who's going to pay the insurance and liability and all the damages that would incur should they get in an accident? It's me. It's not the school. It's me as the parent. So I have a very vested interest in how my child comes out of driver's ed. I believe this is an opportunity to give parents another chance to teach their children, to exercise those opportunities for parent choices in the state of Iowa. The final thing I'll say is that as we've come through COVID, I've had many parents call and ask, why can't we teach this to our children? Why are we exempt from it? Many students today are behind in their driver's education because they couldn't get into the school system due to COVID, or those schools who didn't come back to in-person learning. And so today we're trying to make it easier, safer, and the opportunity exists for parents and their students to be able to obtain their driver's license. With that, Mr. Speaker, I move Senate File 546 for its final time and ask that it be read for its final time.
The gentleman from Clark moves Senate File 546 be read for the last time, placed on its passage. Are there objections? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
Senate File 546, a bill for an act relating to private instruction and driver's education be enacted by the General Assembly of the State of Iowa.
The question now, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of its passage shall vote aye. Those opposed shall vote no. The clerk will open the machine and receive your vote. Landon, aye. Hall, no. Have you all now voted? The clerk will close the machine and record your vote. The House will pay attention to the results of the vote. Those voting aye, 59. Those voting no, 33. Absent or not voting, 8. The bill, having received a constitutional majority, is declared to have passed the House.